Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Redhill. I am Chief Marketing Officer and a partner at Deloitte Australia.
And I'm Vesa Playfair. I'm the Head of Corporate Affairs and Communications at Deloitte.
Now, we've been asked to talk to camera about a few issues that are going to be relevant to students of business communications and journalism. So we're going to do this very informally. Vesa is a specialist in media communications with a lot of experience of crisis management and corporate affairs management, and myself as an ex-journalist and having worked in the same field. Between us, we sort of manage a lot of the issues that come across Deloitte's horizon. So we're just going to go work through a series of questions that we've been put and give you some unrehearsed and authentic answers. A brief introduction to Deloitte, what the company does and its global nature. Well, Deloitte is known as one of the big four accounting firms, and there are four alongside KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers and Ernst & Young. Deloitte is a behemoth that extends worldwide. I think we're in over 150 countries. We do around $28 billion in global revenue, working with 180,000 people. So we operate in various professional services fields of audit, tax, compliance, financial advisory services and consulting. We also do some very interesting stuff in Australia in the area of technology, data, analytics, forensic, a host of other interesting spaces that in particular use technology as a platform, and also communications oriented activities like social media. So we're going to talk a little bit about those in more detail, but that's Deloitte Australia. Now, my role as Head of Marketing Communications and Business Development is really to oversee the process of building eminence in the market through communications, through our web activities, through advertising, events and thought leadership and so forth. So the eminence part opened the doors to big opportunities in the market for sales, oversee the management of strategic accounts and nurturing and growing those accounts. So opening the door, making sure that the market is aware of Deloitte, and obviously that we stay in good contact and continually refresh and nurture those client relationships. But at the front end of that is eminence, and that's what we're talking about today, because communications and corporate affairs is all about managing our reputation in as positive a manner as possible. So that's my role. How would you describe your role, Vesa, as Head of Communications and Corporate Affairs?
As David said, it's very much about eminence, and we don't call ourselves public relations practitioners or publicists. We are about building eminence, about helping our partners connect with clients, and of course protecting reputation.
So why does Deloitte need media relations expertise, and how critical is it to the company, Vesa?
Media relations is a key part of the corporate affairs armoury. And I have a team of about six practitioners, mostly senior, and they each operate and look after different practices within the firm, the audit, the tax, the consulting, etc. My job as Head of Corporate Affairs is really to act in terms of quality control and also to help with strategy, as well as looking after the PR and communications needs of our leaders. Why do we need strong media relations skills? Because obviously media is a key channel that we go to market. It's not the only channel, and it's one that we have to work together with government relations, and I use this word thought leadership, but that is the primary platform that we use to build eminence. And it's the provision of pieces of thought leadership, which we then launch to the media, which builds profile for our partners in our firm.
So it's fair to say that Vesa's group and herself as specialists deal directly with journalists in the media, absolutely spruik our point of view and present our ideas in advance of their public release for journalists at times to take advantage of, but also as consultants and advisors to the actual partners who themselves have to front Deloitte and speak to the media. So not only is Vesa and her team providing that sort of intermediary relationship and as a conduit to the media, but also acting as a consultant and trainers to many of our people who have roles in public speaking. So who would you consider are your main audiences when communicating via the media, Vesa?
So key audiences would have to be our clients, and bear in mind for firms like Deloitte, that's both the public sector clients as well as the private sector. And therein lies a great challenge for us, as you can imagine, government and private. We also see as a key audience our own people and potential recruits, because firms like Deloitte are constantly having to recruit. And finally, for, again, professional services firms, regulators. ASIC, APRA, ATO are all major regulators that we have to interact with, and we have to basically be very careful how we communicate with.
That's a very good point about the internal market. Effectively, I'm fond of saying that if we do a really good job in marketing and communications, we're going to put ourselves out of a job, because we're training 5,700 people to effectively do the job of communicating for us and marketing our brand and our messages. And I forgot to mention that's the size of the firm in Australia. We're pushing 6,000 people, and I think we are looking at doing around $1 billion revenue this year for the first time. In the main, what are the key media that you target in our campaigns, Vesa?
I guess to work out which are the key media, we have to look at who are the audiences. So for us, we are selling predominantly to senior executives, directors, CEOs. We call it the C-suite, CFOs, chief risk officers, etc. What do they read? What are they looking at? Where are they getting their news from? As well as senior heads of department and sometimes policy advisors for ministers. So we would look at the national media, such as The Australian, the Financial Review, also major trade publications like CFO magazine, which is a key one for us, obviously BRW, and then in our main markets of Victoria and New South Wales, The Age, the Sydney Morning Herald. When we're doing regional plays, like increasingly the resource sector has been such a key market for us, key industry group, that means West Australia and Queensland become very critical, because that's where a lot of them are based. So then we would go to the main metropolitans in those markets, the West Australian, the Courier Mail, the Adelaide Advertiser, etc. And then we are increasingly moving towards TV, more and more electronic. So you would go for ABC, Late Line Business, Sky Business, ABC radios, AM and PM programs, Radio National in the morning. It's really those main programs that we know those clients and those key targets are reading and watching.
And increasingly we look to, when we get good content generated on our thought leadership or our individual specialists, we try and recycle that through our own thought leadership or by posting it on our website if it's in the electronic media. I would say that your job has got a lot easier over the last 6 or 8 months since we acquired a business which you might know about called Access Economics, now Deloitte Access Economics. And Vesa, that's been a bit of a gift for you in the media team.
It's a gift in that it's doubled our media coverage, and we've gone from sort of third in the big four. Bear in mind we're the smallest of the big four in Australia, but in terms of media we're now the largest in terms of our share of voice, and that's really been driven by this firm called Access Economics, who joined us in April. It's a two-edged sword. It's given us a wonderful profile because they're constantly producing reports on all sorts of cutting-edge policy issues. It's a negative because a lot of those reports are very high profile and tend to irritate other key stakeholders of the firm. So for people like myself, it's actually meant that we have had to be very careful with our stakeholder management, and professional services firms are all about stakeholder management. So, you produce a report for the minerals industry on the carbon tax, and of course the governments might be very unhappy with what you're saying. So we've had to be extremely careful with managing our internal stakeholders as well as our external stakeholders. So two-edged sword.
It is an area of at times tension, because you need to remain scrupulously objective in the media, while at all times having something to say that's newsworthy and to have a point of view that actually moves the conversation forward. And that blends into the next question where I've been asked, how do we use social media at Deloitte? And that's probably the area of perceived emergent risk, yet also greatest opportunity for us as a firm, both internally within the firm and externally. So Deloitte is probably seen as one of the leaders, certainly the leader in professional services in Australia, and certainly Deloitte Australia within the global network of Deloitte member firms is seen as a leader in the way we use social media, because we've been quite forward-looking in embracing the possibilities of the technology and its potential to flatten the management hierarchy within the business and get the conversation going within almost 6,000 people, and also to accelerate the spread of and adoption of new ideas. So. We use social media for a number of different things. Internally, we use it for product innovation. We get people to add to and comment on new ideas that are put forward around products or initiatives or campaigns. We use it, in a sense, to just bond and foment our culture and get conversations going about all sorts of things that could be professional or personal issues, or just asking questions and having them answered by your 6,000 best friends. We use a technology called Yammer for that inside the firm, where I think the world's biggest single user of Yammer here in Deloitte Australia, which is more or less like a microblogging site, like a Twitter, but behind a firewall. So it's a protected conversation inside the firm. Now, we also use Facebook for recruitment and for spruiking points of view and building our brand online. We use a number of other media like YouTube to actually promote ideas and have a bit of fun. Advertising, thought leadership, presentations and so forth are going on YouTube. We're actually forming a global YouTube channel. But most pertinent for the media students amongst you is the way we've used Twitter as the media for disseminating our points of view. And in particular, we were the first in Australia to use Twitter as the commentary media for disseminating our perspective on the federal budget. I think 4 years ago now we started tweeting our comments, our perspective on the budget as it was being delivered in real time by the Treasurer Wayne Swan. And we had the unusual situation of having other members of Parliament in federal Parliament actually reading our comments on the budget as it was still being delivered by Mr. Swan, as well as really owning the space as a trending topic that on the evening that it happened, and getting a number of Australia's leading and most influential journalists following Deloitte's point of view on the budget. So we see it as an immensely powerful medium for getting ahead of the game, for connecting with undiscovered audiences outside the firm, and harnessing collective wisdom inside the firm. So we are right in that space. Look,
it's also a major source of stories for journalists. So we realised very early on in the game that journos were surfing Twitter to pick up stories. So every press release we put out, one of the key channels, you've got to release it through Twitter. And I think that's important. The other one that we're using more is LinkedIn. And we're only just starting to use that properly, but LinkedIn is very much a Facebook for executives. That's how we view it. We've a couple of recent things that have worked quite well for us. We've got together with an industry association, and together we used LinkedIn to promote a conference and all the thought leadership that was coming through that conference, and our speakers, obviously. We're also finding with partners who are trying to build their personal profile and their personal brand that LinkedIn is probably not a bad one, because it already has a network of fellow executives. So I think we've still got a long way to go, but social media, as David said, is a key channel that no one in our business of communications can ignore.
Well, one other point worth mentioning is, I mentioned at the beginning that it's seen as an area of risk, and potentially you've all seen individuals, could be Stephanie Rice or corporations like United Airlines, being destroyed because of their, or destroying their reputation or damaging their reputation in a very public way through inadvertent communications via social media. So with a business of ours where we're handling a lot of client confidential information and a lot of reputations, it could be seen as a very risky area. Our philosophy, I guess, is to empower and trust our own people, educate them and make them very clearly aware of the potential for social media to spiral an issue out of control, and also of their own responsibilities regarding our reputation, speaking on behalf of the firm, and their responsibility in respect of client information. So we haven't had a major issue to date. We've had a few issues which we've managed very proactively. But it's always out there, but you can't, as Vesa says, ignore the potential of social media to really connect with those audiences and in the case of journalists, give them great opportunities for stories. So how do you go about developing relationships with journalists? How do we manage those relationships?
Look, our philosophy at Deloitte is it's all about trust. It's about building credible, trustful relationships with journalists, and you've got to do that before you go to them, before you need them to pitch a story. So we regularly, I guess, meet with, we canvass what they need, we find out what's going on in the industry, and we seek to assist them. So we have a philosophy that we never say no, or no comment is just, you never say no comment to a journalist. You always try and help them. So, for example, work that's involved with clients, we cannot comment on. It's a policy. So we would say to a journalist who wants a comment on an issue that we cannot comment, we would not say no comment. We would say, look, I'm sorry, we cannot comment on this matter because it's a client matter, it's firm policy, but can I suggest that you call, and we will actually direct them to the client's PR person. So that philosophy of building a trustful, respectful relationship is really important. We also have another philosophy. We never put out a press release that has adjectives. I hate adjectives. I mean, how wonderful you are, how big you are. Well, you can say the size, but adjectives, superlatives, creating a PR-y release is just a turn-off to a journalist. So our releases are factual, they're full of numbers, they're full of an argument, and they really have a strong news story. So we seek to write a press release that can be replicated in the media as a news story. And we get feedback from the journalists that they like that. And as a result, they trust what we give them. They know we're not going to give them a bunch of PR hype.
That's a very good point, and that's certainly always worked for me in my previous incarnations before Deloitte as a PR leader, or as a communications leader. Write your news story write your press release, if you like, as you would like to see it printed in the media, and only call a journalist when you've got something genuinely new or exclusive to offer them, and you develop very trusted, positive relationships like that. So how do we measure our success in dealing with the media here at Deloitte?
Well, there's the obvious one, which is media hits. And for firms like Deloitte, we do not get negative media, or rarely do we get negative media. So most of our media is positive, so hits become quite important. Obviously, favourable hits is key. So those of you that may end up working for firms that have mixed coverage, then you would tend to look at favourability ratings, how favourable is it piece. We also look at how dominant is our spokesperson in the piece. So unfortunately, much of the big four tend to appear in every story. Most of the journalists have been told by their editors that if they get one to comment, they should get the other three as well. So if we tend to dominate a piece, that's marvellous. If we're at the front of the paper, that's obviously important. But those are some of the things we would look at. And if we get any leads generated, so we're always seeking someone picking up the phone and ringing the partner, having read the piece, and that sort of feedback is gold to us.
What about the downside? What about the potentially damaging issues that might come across your desk, and how do you deal with them? And perhaps you could provide an example of one of those incidences.
Well, the key for an issue is to have some advance warning. And, with all the Deloitte Access Economics reports, some of which are quite critical, it's one of the things we've worked very hard at is getting advance warning. If we have advance warning of something that's going to hit in the next 1, 2, 3 days, it gives us a chance to go out to all the stakeholders and make sure that they have at their fingertips some key responses if they get rung by clients. So advance warning is critical. In the case of something where you don't have advance warning, and I'll give you sort of one example. It sort of happened a number of years ago, but it still was certainly the biggest issue I had to face at Deloitte. We had one of our partners in Thailand doing some insolvency work, and he got assassinated because of his insolvency work. Now, that story spun round the world. And within basically 4 hours, we had calls coming in from all over the world about the Deloitte partner assassinated in Thailand. What was absolutely critical, because I remember I was here, it was 8 o'clock at night when the first call came through, was to get to the leaders and work with the leaders in terms of what were we going to say. And our first response had to be one that was very supportive of our people, because something like that, where the world's media are knocking on your door, you have to be extremely careful how you appear. And so it really was a matter of sitting down. It was working what our key messages were, working out who was affected, how we were going to respond, what were some of the scenarios we were going to have to deal with over the next 10 days. And we had effectively a war room set up. We had every day we were looking at the types of questions that were coming in and being able to respond, but at the same time we had to appear, and it was very important that our CEO presented as someone who was very responsive and sensitive to the needs of our people, and that was absolutely key message. But we don't get that many issues, but when they do come up, I'm lucky. I have a team of very strong senior practitioners, and I must admit, over the years we've tended to move more and more towards employing people who have at least 10 years experience.
So some keys there. I think the previous question we addressed, relationships with journalists, making friends before you need them, building those relationships in advance. It obviously is going to help you when the issue that you're not so keen to deal with comes across your radar. But if you're not prepared, I think you're on the back foot from the beginning. So being clear about your response and briefing all your key people about the line that you've got to hold is essential.
Can I just say, David talked about training, and we've talked about having the relationship with the journalists. The other key relationship is with, as David's just said, with your own people, and having the respect of your key spokespeople. And one of the ways we try and obtain that is we do train them. So we insist that any partner who speaks to the media has gone through a training session. That training session we attend, and we ensure that they know exactly what the protocol is. And the protocol is that they have to work with us, that we protect them, we act as their interpreter. If something is wrongly said, we're on the case. And they know that they're not to talk to the media without having first consulted with us, that the worst thing you can do is pick up the phone and respond. You have to consider, as David said, and plan. So training your own spokespeople, building credibility with them and trust with them is as important as the way you manage the media themselves.
So finally, to Vessa's previous point, and one of the questions, which was how do we source candidates for junior communications roles in our business? Well, I have to say that Deloitte's probably in a minority. We have a fairly small and very lean and very experienced communications team under Vessa. I wouldn't say that we're working in a high-risk business, but because of the complex nature of the issues that we're dealing with at any one time, we really need people who are pretty seasoned, who know the way the media works, who can jump into an issue headlong without a lot of briefing and just intuitively know what the right strategy is. So we're probably not a good example of a good training ground for journalists, for junior media specialists, because we don't really want people learning on the job or making mistakes. But having said that, I'm sure you have some tips for the people watching on what might set trainees off on the right tack for getting a job like that.
As I said before, over the last 10 years, it's become apparent that we really need to have quite a senior team of corporate affairs practitioners. Because of the issues, because of the complexity, as David said, we're dealing with governments around the country and often very senior business executives. However, those of you, I guess, wanting to get into this area, let me give you some great advice. I mean, when I go to employ people now, I look for 3 key areas in corporate affairs. I want people that have had experience in the media, either as a practitioner, either as a journalist or possibly working for a large public relations firm. I also want people that understand government relations. Why? Because increasingly they are interrelated, very closely linked with what we're doing within our practice. So I want someone that's either worked for a minister as a policy or a press secretary, etc., or even in a department, but understands how government and politicians work. And thirdly, I'd like them to have had some issue management experience, i.e. they've been at the front line of having to deal under enormous pressure with a difficult issue and having to react very quickly in terms of their ability to understand stakeholder management. So I would recommend to all of you, if you're interested in corporate affairs, that you really seek to put yourself through those areas. So you look to get some experience with a minister as a press secretary, that you seek to go and work with possibly an industry association or a business association. Try and do a stint as a journalist. I think it's absolutely invaluable to work in the media and understand what is a news story, what are the pressures they're under, how they operate, and most of all, try and get some issue management experience, because that is invaluable and it's not one that we want you to learn on the job. So good luck.
To those 3 points, I would add 3 more, and those are great tips. I guess the traits that I look for when I'm looking for a media specialist are a real passion for the subject, and that goes hand in hand with initiative that Vesa refers to actually show that you've had the get up and go to go and work in various dimensions of the media and corporate affairs and public relations. Really shows that there's a commitment to developing experience in that. The second quality I look for is the ability to be objective and look at an issue from various angles. We all have strong points of view and passionate predilections around issues, but really to be a great journalist or a great media advisor, you have to put your own views at times to the side and be able to examine an issue from all dimensions and present them almost clinically. And finally, I think the basic tool in trade is the ability to communicate, and written communications is fundamental. Whether you're writing a script for a video, whether you're writing a news article or a press release, earning your spurs comes down to being able to communicate very effectively and pretty rapidly at times. And you can never get too much practice at the basic tools of the trade, and that is communicating and writing. I hope that that's all very useful to you, and to Vesa's point, wishing you the best of luck in your careers, and look forward to running into you someday face to face. All the best.